Welcome into another Inside Carolina Reaction Show. I'm your host, Tommy Ashley. That's Jason Staples. We're sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt, but also, as always, these football shows sponsored by Big Game USA. The ball right there behind me. Here's the video. You can check it out.
You think you know North Carolina? It's not just the Smoky Mountains and the Old Well. This is Kenan Stadium, where the Jordan Fly Elite game ball makes its debut and its homecoming. Born to fly, built for Carolina. Snag your Carolina blue today.
Born to fly, built for Carolina, Jordan Fly Elite Football with the logo and the foot on it. You can get it at Big Game USA. Check out the link in the description and also the link at the end of this video. Jason Staples, we are gathered here today to get through this thing.
Don't even start with that one.
It's not a laughing matter, but when you think about how the NCAA has created this transfer portal and this freedom of movement across the board, it's a mess. And now the news that came out today, we're recording this on Tuesday night, April 22nd. The news that came out today that UNC linebacker Amare Campbell has entered the portal. Now, we did a show on another big name that entered last week, Bo Atkinson. This is another fella in Campbell that played a ton last year and expected to play that much this year. We'll talk a little bit about maybe replacements and targets in a second. But, Jason, your thoughts on Campbell and him entering the portal at this point? He entered in December when the coaching change happened. Then he immediately jumped out when everything sort of settled a little bit. Now here we are again in late April, Amare Campbell in the portal.
Well, this is not one of those guys that as the coaching staff you're trying to push out.
You'd think.
Yeah. You're looking at a guy that had 758 snaps last year. And yes, I know the PFF grades you take with a grain of salt to some degree, but they are helpful and a barometer. And I think his grade was pretty accurate for last year. It was a 72.4 on 758 snaps, which means well above replacement level. He's a good player. And the tape bears that out. You're looking at a guy 6'1", 230, who's pretty fluid and has some explosiveness about him. Was pretty good as a blitzer, had 8 sacks last year. 8 sacks from the linebacker spot in a defense that, was not, that's not the outside linebacker spot or rush end or anything. He had 8 sacks. He was able to get his hand on the football. He had 2 batted balls. He had, some specific skills in the coverage game because of some of the explosiveness that he's got. He's a good player. You want to see if you can get him back from the portal if at all possible. But he's a good player, and it's going to be hard to replace him with somebody better. I mean, that's the bottom line. I don't know why he's in the portal. I don't know the situation. I mean, again, you mentioned he got in before, but I'll just say this. You don't generally make your defense better by losing guys like Amare Campbell.
Yeah, exactly. And if we know how it was under Mac Brown, guys play a ton. And one thing about Campbell, Jason, is he played injured, and he played through a lot of dings and nicks and all that kind of stuff. A tough guy. When you look at the tape and you wonder, I've read some things on the message boards and all, and people talk about how, he's not going to start. So, he didn't want to get recruited over. And granted, everybody gets recruited over. But, Jason, your thoughts when you hear those type things with Campbell? I mean, this is a guy you mentioned, 76 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks. I know you said 8. It's close enough.
I'm going off of PFF numbers and what they actually credit them for. And it gets divvied up a little bit different.
Well, there you go. So folks that are listening to this know why it's different on the official site versus PFF. But when you look at what you said his grade is, comparatively speaking to what North Carolina linebackers have been, he has been consistently solid. So what kind of loss is this? And it's not just on the field, right? It's the leadership aspect. We've seen videos with him being mic'd up, taking leadership roles. How big a loss is it in that regard for this North Carolina team?
It's hard to assess that exactly because you do have an entirely new coaching staff, so your leadership is sort of in flux as it is. But normally when you do take over with the new staff, you want the guys who are actually leaders, who are actually hard workers, who've actually earned the respect of their teammates to stay out there. And so in that respect, yeah, I mean, if he's a guy that the new coaching staff is choosing to get mic'd up in practice, that's not a guy they're looking at losing. Right? That's not a guy they're pushing out the door. That's also not a guy that you're not expecting to start. Right? Anybody who's like, oh, well, he just didn't, he wasn't going to start, so he's going elsewhere. Who was going to start over him?
Yeah. I mean, and granted, I'm addressing some comments on a message board, and it's Inside Carolina message boards. We have a fabulous message board community, but some of the comments about why guys are entering the portal and things have just been a little bit off base, I think. Nothing personal. I just think when you say guys are soft or they don't, like this or that, and this is something we can talk about now. We talked about it with Atkinson. Sometimes it's just not a fit with the change in the culture. And Jason, you've seen that before, and I want to talk about that as well. Some guys just don't like the new way of doing things. It doesn't make them soft. It doesn't make them this or that. And a lot of people say, well, why don't folks want to flock to play for Bill Belichick? I get that. I understand that. But this is college football, and it's different.
Guys didn't always flock to play for Belichick, even in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the truth. Like, look, if we're gonna be truthful, right? And that's something that we at Inside Carolina pride ourselves on doing, is being truthful and being the independent voice of North Carolina sports. We're not here to blow smoke. We're not here to represent the university and to help everybody just see sunshine and rainbows and support every decision that's made by the university and its athletic department. What we do try to do is explain why decisions are made, what's happening. We want to look at the why. We want to look at how, the what, those sorts of things. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at what Belichick's own former players, some of his old stars on those Patriots teams said about when it was first reported that he was going to be coaching in college, some of those guys were like, really? How's that going to work? And, you can hear their impressions of exactly what they expected. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're seeing. I mean, what we saw in practice was a very involved Belichick and an organized Belichick and an organized coaching staff. And it's a coaching staff that's full of guys that have a reputation of really knowing ball and being able to coach their respective positions and do their responsibilities, as you would expect. But there are a lot of good football coaches in this game. There are some other good staffs in this game. And, the idea of, well, why not flock to play for Belichick? Well, Kirby Smart still has a job. Ryan Day, regardless of what you think of the man's beard, Ryan Day just won a national championship at Ohio State. And, right now, I mean, I think we just saw some people are expecting Bo Atkinson to end up there. And which tells you, again, Bo Atkinson is not, he's not leaving because he's not good enough to play at North Carolina, right? There are a lot of good places to go. That doesn't mean that, it wouldn't be a smart decision for a lot of guys to come and play for Bill Belichick and get the opportunity to get coached by him and that coaching staff. We need to be clear about that, right? He is one of the greatest coaches to ever coach the game, and I think you can make a very strong case that as a defensive coordinator and defensive mind, he might be the mind, the greatest defensive coach in the history of the game. You can make a strong case for that. But it's not just as simple as Belichick's last name should draw every guy that he wants to get. It's just not that simple. And sometimes, like you said, sometimes guys just don't, it's just not a fit. So maybe that's it. Maybe it's other things. We don't really know for sure what Campbell's motivation is here, what his reasoning is. What we do know is on the what, Carolina's going to have to replace the guy that was going to be their their bell cow, their best large bodied, he's 230 pounds, their best every down linebacker. Kamari House is a high ceiling guy. He's a guy that I think has a lot of potential and should be a really good backer for them. But he's what, 210? Soaking wet? Like, he's not that full 3 down, he's not a guy you expect to play 758 snaps and come out of the end of the year, really as he went into it. So, and by the way, I wouldn't have expected Campbell to play 750 snaps under this staff either. I think they're going to rotate a little bit more at some of those positions. They're trying to build some depth there and all that. But he still, I think, would have been a starter. So now the question is, how do you replace this guy who was a very good player, or slated to be a very good player within your defense, which is a defense that is going to make use of versatile, fast linebackers, if at all possible?
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that. We're talking about Jason Staples here. Amare Campbell to the portal for North Carolina. So the status of UNC's linebacker room at the moment, we'll talk about the transfers in. Mikai Gbayor comes from Nebraska via Missouri. You can see it on the screen, Bayer on the screen. Jason, when you've reviewed his tape, and we've talked a lot about Kamari House, so we're not going to do that here. You can go back and watch these videos back when all that went down, I guess in December, January, with House joining in Tar Heels. But Bayer comes to North Carolina. This picture that's on the screen now, if you're watching on YouTube, he certainly looks the part. What'd you see on film from Bayer?
He's a good player, and a lot of the instincts are there. You can see him. He's a stiffer player in terms of just the lateral side to side stuff than Campbell, but in a lot of respects, he's similar to Campbell athletically. I think Campbell's the more explosive, a little bit less stiff player, and Bayer is a longer player. He's got longer wingspan. I think he's a little higher cut, but he's one of those guys. We all know the type where he's the linebacker who runs kind of with big arms, runs real hard and with the sort of shorter, choppier steps, and always looks like he's motoring. He's one of those guys, but he also is a guy that comes downhill real quickly. Showed some blitz capacity in the film that I reviewed. Came downhill actually against Indiana. That's actually, I'm pretty sure, the game that this screenshots from. Against Indiana, there's one play that really stood out where he's in pass coverage and they ran a little like shallow cross with some interference, basically across the backers, and he managed to come underneath that, like underneath the mesh type player, and blow up that shallow cross in a really impressive way that showed really good understanding and diagnosis of what was happening in front of him. He also was well coached at Nebraska. That's a Nebraska staff that with Matt Rule and that group defensively, they were well coached. And so he's coming in with that. But again, he's not, I don't think that he's a top level in the ACC type backer. I think he's maybe a tick behind Amare Campbell if I was ranking levels. Now, his Pro Football Focus grade on the year was 72, which is just a few decimal points, a few points below what Campbell had, but he only did that in 375 snaps. So it's a little bit different in that context. He split reps there. And then when he went to Missouri for the spring, he did not come out of the spring a clear starter, which I think is why he transferred. He's got 1 year left. He's a guy that, he wants to play. And I think it's just 1 year, right? But he's a guy that wants to play. He did not come out of the Missouri spring with a clear, he's going to take the majority of the reps there. He was in kind of a 3-way situation for 2 spots where they were going to rotate from what it looked like to me. But I do like the pickup, and actually I really would have loved the pickup for him to be a guy together with Amare Campbell that you can put on the field. You can put both of them on the field at times. You can put both of them on the field with House at times. You can rotate those guys a little bit and really have some similarities there that you can work with. I don't see him, he doesn't have, I think he's more of like a 4.7 type guy, maybe 4.8 type guy, probably 4.8 actually, if I was thinking about an honest laser system. Good athlete, but not one of those guys that's fluid and is just going to be able to run sideline to sideline and chase guys down in the ACC. It's just not who he is. But is he a linebacker who belongs at this level, who can start at this level, who can be a very solid player for you at this level? I think the answer to all of those questions is yes. I think, like I said, just a tick behind Amare Campbell, some advantages with more length, but in terms of fluidity and explosiveness, just a tick back from Campbell, and not quite as much of a splash play kind of guy as Campbell. But you're going to get some good consistency and a guy that has a good feel for the game there. So I think, again, he's a guy that comes in and more than likely, I mean, if Campbell's not around, more than likely he's one of your starters.
Don Callahan had an article back on April 16th about Gbayor's commitment, number 6 portal linebacker, according to 24/7 Sports. Jason, another guy that had visited North Carolina, and they're certainly in the hunt for Andrew Simpson, Boise State linebacker. An interesting target here. Don't know if he comes to Carolina. Probably an expensive piece if that does get worked out. But Jason, when you reviewed the tape on Simpson, what'd you see?
He's really similar, actually, to Amare Campbell. I mean, even body size and body type is similar. I think he's a little bit stubbier and a little thicker than Campbell, and a little bit more of what I would call a thumper in terms of what he is. Actually, some similarities to Power Eccles in terms of the kind of backer that he is, but a bigger body than Eccles. I mean, Eccles was an undersized guy who loved to hit. This was a guy who's, he's a little shorter, a little stubbier at 6 foot, just like Campbell, but he's not undersized. He's pushing 240. And one of the things that actually really impressed me, and it's worth taking a look at if you get a chance, if you actually go to his Twitter account, he's got a whole highlight reel of all of his interceptions and such from practice, from scrimmages, and from various games and all of that. And the ball skills for a linebacker are really good, actually. His ability to catch the football when it's in his radius. He had a couple interceptions when he had a club on his hand, where he's intercepting balls with one hand. And in more than one context, you see some of that come out in games as well. He had one interception this last year against Nevada. That was against UNLV. Misread the columns there. But he had one interception there where, again, just did a really nice job of feeling out the play in front of him. And you can see the intuition and the football smarts. The thing that stood out probably most to me about this guy is, first of all, just the build, that he is a thumper. He's a guy that brings some size to the table. But his football IQ jumps off the charts. I think jumps off the tape. He is really, really smart and tends to be moving in the right direction, sifts through traffic naturally. One of those guys who, triggers well against the run. A lot of pluses there. Another guy that kind of split reps. I mean, he was not full-time on the field there. He averaged about 40, 45 snaps a game, somewhere in there, but about 40, maybe 43 snaps a game. I didn't do the math itself, but about 500 total snaps on the field. So another 250 short of Campbell. So again, a guy that rotated, and there were times where they had a quicker, little smaller bodied backer in his spot for certain situations. But they also really liked to blitz him at Boise State because he seems to have been a guy that understood timing and was able to kind of shed some blocks. I liked his ability to shed blocks. He's another guy that if he comes in, he's going to play starter minutes. You're not paying for this guy for him to come and sit on the bench. And if he were coming in, again, if you were coming in with Amare Campbell on the roster, you would expect him and Campbell probably to be the first two, and then House and Gbayor to probably be the next two, and that they would rotate situationally and move things around, move guys around depending on who. If they have three on the field, sometimes they might go four. Whatever they're doing defensively, those would probably be your first four backers, and all of them are competent. So, Simpson, there's a lot to like. I think he is a guy that would make a lot of sense in Belichick's defense. As a guy who is a very smart, intuitive type player, I do think he's another guy that, in terms of his foot speed, maybe a little more on the limited side. I don't think he's faster than, say, a 4.8. You're not breaking out the extra fast stopwatch to make sure that you can keep up with him, but he's one of those guys that the intuition, the football smarts, kind of make up for that within the box, especially. Now, if I were an opposing offensive analyst or offensive coordinator, and I saw that he was coming on the Carolina roster and would likely start this next year, I would already be trying to dial up some matchups where I could get my fastest running back on him in space. Trying to take him on some out routes and things like that to force him to chase into the flat. Just a standard flat route where if you can formation him to where he's got to cover the guy into the flat, you're probably going to be able to outrun him. But otherwise, I think there's a lot to like there, and I think again a piece that you can win with in the ACC.
Yeah, they got to get him. He was on campus today, or at least overnight on Tuesday the 22nd. Jason, I'm just looking at the roster for linebackers. Austin Alexander's on there, Daniel Anderson, Evan Bennett, Amare Campbell, no longer, Kamari House. We've talked about Cade Law, no. Cruz Law, no. Michael Short, Simpson, Tyler Thompson's listed as a linebacker. It's an interesting room that they're going to have to fill and spend some money. Stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Stay tuned to Don Callahan for all the recruiting. And Jason Staples and I will be back with any special reaction shows we need to do on these cases. It's always interesting in the offseason. That's because there is none. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt. Shout out to Big Game USA. Get your official game ball. Maybe carry it with you to Ireland next year. But stay tuned to Inside Carolina. Shout out Johnny T-Shirt. Shout out Jason Staples for always keeping it fun. North Carolina's Amare Campbell to the portal. As the portal turns, or as the portal churns. Stay tuned for Noon Dish on Wednesday the 23rd at noon, live with Don Callahan. Otherwise, we'll see you around.